Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you are here. Welcome to this Catalyst full moon forecast. We're going to be looking at the main astrological themes related to our upcoming Aquarius full moon, which will be on the 9th of August, and up to really the beginning of Virgo season. The sun moves into the zodiac sign of Virgo on the 22nd, and our next new moon will be on the 23rd. So we're going to look at the main themes of the next 2 weeks. And of course, as I'm recording this, we are officially at the 8-8 Lions Gateway. So the sun has passed the midpoint of the zodiac sign of Leo, which marks the 8-8 gateway, and here we are. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well, kind of do a little bit of a check-in of the last week. I feel like the first quarter moon in Scorpio was very difficult for people. This last week has also been very difficult. People have been feeling the squeeze big time as we've prepared to move through this very narrow gateway, the eye of the needle, so to speak. Some folks have been so burdened by they're so weighed down by their burdens that they don't even know exist, that they're not making it through the gateway. So it's just been very trying. So I'll share a little bit about my personal journey over the last week, just to give, just tell my story, right? I'll tell my story and what's been going on, and we'll just connect human to human, because that's really all we have. And that truly, if you're going to talk about a Leo Aquarius dichotomy here, that's perfect, right? We're all humans and we're all sharing human to human. And when we do that, we create a network. And that is what Aquarius really represents, is that network of organization, of society, of a community, of a family, right? So we have a lot to talk about. This is going to be a banger of a week. I'll tell you what. I mean, it was already so difficult making it to this point. We still have really this week until we exit these Lionsgate energies. The third quarter moon on the 16th, I think, is when we're really going to be moving. We're moving through the gateway now, and things will be really closing out by the time we get to the 16th. And of course, third quarter moon, that's really the beginning of the end of the lunar cycle. So by the time we get to Virgo season, these energies are going to be closing out, and we're going to be moving on. And things will start really coming to fruition, as they always do in Virgo season. So where do we even start? I think, and I don't have a ton of PSAs other than the eclipse cycle is going to soon be coming to an end. The next eclipse cycle starts on the 7th of September. It's a total full moon lunar eclipse. So I am going to be doing a report, but it's only going to be available to the membership. So if you are interested in that, you may want to consider signing up. You also get 2 energy readings per month on the off weeks from these forecasts. Dedicated discount code for all my services, and then premium membership gets a personal reading or energy work session every month as well. So you may want to consider that. Everything's in the description box below as per usual. And so let's just get on with it. So as I said, here we are in the Lion's Gate. One of the things that really made me laugh a lot this week, because it just popped into my head because I was just thinking about it and considering it and meditating on the Lion's Gate and going through my own stuff. But it just made me laugh so hard, because the phrase that popped into my mind is like, well, we're about to be unburdened by what has been. And I was like, oh, the irony, right? Who knew that that would be more than just a word salad nonsense? It actually made sense. So here we are. Some of us, hopefully more than some of us, are unburdened by what has been, or at least are in the process of shedding that. And of course, we are still in the year of the snake. That hasn't ended either. So that's part of this process as well, is shedding that stuff and being unburdened by what, can't stop laughing, what has been. So the first quarter moon was in Scorpio, and I can say for me personally, it was very challenging. It was very difficult. Moon in Scorpio, I have a moon in Scorpio, so it's not like it was unfamiliar, but it's kind of like, oh, there you are, darkness, my old friend, come to talk with you again. And that's what it really felt like. Now, not everybody's experiencing things the same way, but I'm just sharing my personal journey. Hopefully, it gives some insight or some clarity for you if you maybe are experiencing the same thing. So, first quarter moons are always a crisis point. What do I do? And with Leo and the sun in Leo in particular, we tend to be very much the center of our own experience, as is supposed to be the case, right? Just as our sun is the center of our solar system, the sun in Leo represents us at the center of our experience. So our authenticity, our expression, our creativity, our passions, our joys, our sorrows, our grief, all of it coming out. And it's really coming from a place of our hearts, right? And so, and that was the beginning of this lunar cycle, right? A new moon in Leo. The Lion's Gate is the sun passing the midpoint of the sign of Leo, right? It's a release point. So before we got to that, though, and then throughout the week, the energies of that Scorpio moon have been very deep, and there has been a lot of darkness, I would say, and knowing and feeling that we are not just individuals in our own experience. It actually does impact and create a resonance. It creates power, right? And so individual hearts coming together in relationship do have to give up aspects of the personal ego in order to commune and create something more than just what we individually can bring forward. And that has expressed itself, I'm sure, in a myriad of ways for people over the past week, like I said. So some of the things that I have personally done in order to unburden myself and to allow the natural process of letting go of some things, one of the things that I did, which was not hard at all, in fact, it was like a sigh of relief to do it, was a total social media detox, right? I haven't been on any social media. I haven't even been paying attention to the news. I have no idea what's going on outside of my orbit and, my own spiritual process, right? And I suspect there's not much different, I'm kind of grateful that Catalyst hasn't taken off to the point where it's my only thing, because I think it would be exhausting to rely exclusively on content that is based on what's going on currently. I think that would be exhausting. You have to come up with a new crisis constantly. So that has been great. I don't know if I'll ever go back, honestly, enough to keep up with certain people and certainly to put out when I produce content myself, but I have this, so I don't really feel the need to engage in the social media realm and the doom scrolling on a regular basis, right? I just, it's been so light. But the other thing that I've done, which was been a real struggle all week, is that I've been caffeine free for a week, and that is just like, oh, what's the point of living if I can't have coffee in the morning? So, and I mean, that's not going to be forever, but I wanted to, institute something that I really needed some discipline and to practice, to have faith and trust that it will pass, right? And that I can let it go and it's going to be okay, right? I can leave it behind and move through the gateway without caffeine. I mean, there's so few things of vices that I really have at this point. So that was one that I did as a personal practice. And it's been a terrible week. I mean, not terrible, but in the way of, I've already was in the darkness with the Scorpio moon, and caffeine and coffee really is a mood booster, right? It really does wonders for depression and things like that. And to not have that, to cut that out at that time was very difficult. And I just muscled through it. And it's okay, right? My body's starting to even out in terms of its reaction to that. My mood is starting to elevate naturally without that, and it's going to be okay, right? And so one of the other things I've been doing as well is working very intentionally with salt. I've been blessing salt, sea salt every day. It's now become part of my morning ritual to bless the salt. And then I use it all day. I use it in my food. I use it in water. I use it after all of my clients, after I wash up. I definitely am using salt. There are other ways. Actually, I got a massage this morning, and my massage therapist and I were kind of swapping war stories for the week because it's been intense for sure. And one of the things she suggested actually that was really great is like putting it in a bag and putting it under the pillow. And I was like, oh, that's so great, because it's really been helping to clear out the psychic debris and to just ground my emotions. And so for me personally, the astral is where I'm the most vulnerable. And so I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to put it under my pillow. So I'm very curious to see how but that was an immediate impact. So I really recommend working with salt if you're not doing it already. It is profoundly powerful. And, the way spirit talks to you, there just was like there was like a billion things about salt coming up on my feed on YouTube. And I was like, okay, fine. And so I listened to a couple things and I was like, okay, yes, I should just, and I know, and I've worked with it in the past, but this is the first time that I've been really consistent and it's showing. So just an idea of what it's been like this week and the ways that we can deepen our practice, the ways that we can support ourselves, and that we can let things go. Okay, because that's really been the essence of this Lionsgate, and every year it's like this, right? The midpoint of Leo is a release point. And so when we release the baggage, we move through the eye of the needle, and we come out the other side ready to radiate once we've released everything that has been holding us down. So hopefully we've been unburdened by what has been. And this is a banger of a week, I'm not going to lie. We got an Aquarius full moon, but even before that, as of today, we have Mars and Libra. We're going to talk a lot about Mars and Libra. I think it's important to really get a sense of what Mars and Libra is all about, and the connections it's having to Saturn and Neptune, Uranus and Pluto. I mean, all of these transpersonal planets, Mars is making really strong connections to all of them. And in fact, when we look at the chart, we're going to see this kite that is happening right now with all of these players, which really indicates that our personal action and initiative is going to be involved in response to large patterns and things transpiring that are not personal, right? These are not personal planets. They are transpersonal. Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, all having this connection in some way to each other and to Mars in Libra. So I hope everyone is taking good care of themselves. Let us know in the comments what you've been up to this week, if you know what kind of challenges you've been facing, if any, how you have managed to unburden yourself leading up to this Lionsgate, because we're all just individual hearts coming together, and it's just a beautiful Leo theme here to have at an Aquarius full moon, because it is the Aquarian nature and the Aquarian archetype that represents the network of all of us together. And yes, the moon in Scorpio was difficult because we did have to let go of our aspects of our own personal expression, our ego, the sense of like entitlement that Leo, and especially a sun in Leo, can really foster. There's been a lot of that this week. It's been coming out of the woodwork, and we let it go, a certain aspect of it, because in order to generate something more than what we individually have, we have to let that go. We have to come into communion. We have to let go a part of ourselves. And Scorpio is the sign of death and rebirth, right? We have to release just the personal and offer it. It's an offering. We're kind of sacrificing something, and sometimes that means sacrificing that entitlement. Sometimes it means sacrificing just what it is that we want or say or express, and offer it into something more than ourselves. And the struggle with that has brought up quite a bit. And I'm sure for me, and I'm sure it has for lots of people. Now, some people have been really on point and things have been lining up so perfectly to release things as they've come up to this Lion's Gate. And that's wonderful, right? And those folks are definitely in a position to be supportive as we come into this Aquarius full moon and the astrology of the next 2 weeks. Okay, so we're gonna take a look at that now. I'm ready. I'm ready to start looking at the astrology. So let's get into it. And I'm sure you're ready too, right? Let's just get right into it here. So I want to make sure we're properly formatted first. Yes. All right. So this is actually the chart for today, which is 8/8, because this kite is really starting to form now, as you can see, with Mars and Libra. So let's talk about Mars first, coming into Libra. A couple things to consider. Mars is at its detriment in Libra, right? It's the sign opposite of its home, which is Aries, which is where Saturn and Neptune are. So as you can see, there is a very distinct opposition happening with Mars, Saturn retrograde, and Neptune retrograde. And they both have different things going on. I'm going to put on my glasses, actually. They both have different things going on when it comes to their positions in Aries, specifically Saturn. So we're going to focus a bit on that as well. So Mars in Libra is at its weakest. Mars is our internal action hero, right? It is the warrior that acts there's no thought here, there's no time here, there is just the now and our instinct. Mars is bold and courageous and impulsive at a lot of times, right? But in Libra, Mars is very measured. Okay, it is very measured, balanced approach to our personal action. Now, when any planet is at its detriment or at its fall position and it's weak, there's always the possibility of overcompensating, right? So if you are a Mars ruled person, right, heavy Aries or Scorpio in any way, especially tied to your sun, moon, or your rising sign, this might be a little bit different. It might be. You might, though, have strong Libra in other areas, so it might not be too awful. So Mars overcompensating, extra impulsive, extra warrior-like, right? Extra aggressive. That certainly, I've seen that too, even in just the last couple of days with Mars coming into Libra. Now, however, Mars and Libra can be very diplomatic, right? But also very, like I said, very measured, right? Action is taken in the interest of justice, right? Not personal ambition, not instinct, not to say that courage and boldness are not warranted here in Libra, but the action is directed at justice, fairness, right? The scales of justice are, in fact, an instrument of measurement, right? So with Mars and the sign of Aries, and this is important when we're going to start talking about the opposition to Saturn, there's no time here, right? There's no time involved with Aries. There's no time. There's only the now with Mars. Libra, on the other hand, is very much based on the dichotomy of past and future, right? Where we've been and where we're going, right? Because it's about finding the balance point between these two poles. And this is where the harvest happens, which is Libra, right? The equinox, right? So Mars coming into Libra, where there is a measured approach, there's a sense of time, there's a sense of finality. That balance of scales, there's only one point. There's only one 0 point, right? And so things might fluctuate in order to find that, but there is truly only one point of balance. And that is finite, right? There's a finite amount on either side in order to achieve that. So, some of the better ways to experience Mars and Libra, I think, in a public setting, we're going to see action taken towards justice, right? And Libra's a cardinal sign, just like Aries. Even though it's an air sign, there's still momentum here. Something happens. Now, you could find that there is a kind of a rashness maybe a rashness or impulsiveness of like, okay, this is not balanced, so I'm going to take this and move it here, and not considering at all what that does to the dynamic of the side that you just took from to add to the other, right? That those scales might balance, but in the process of that happening, it is really fluctuating. So that's something to consider. In terms of your own personal action and initiative, right? That it can be, yes, it can be very measured, but also at the same time with Mars involved, it can be very impulsive to be like, well, this isn't balanced, so let me fix it, right? That's not necessarily a terrible thing, but remember that Libra is ruled by Venus, and Lady Justice is blind, and there's a sensitivity to what is actually balanced here that needs to be part of this conversation. So just be mindful of that with Mars and Libra. Now, if you have Mars and Libra, and I know some people that do, this is a great time for you because this is something you're comfortable with. Your action and outward momentum is already naturally naturally that blueprint is already, it's part of your blueprint is what I'm trying to say. Sometimes my mouth and my words cannot keep up with the flow of the energy coming through. But if you have Mars and Libra, for instance, you already have the blueprint for being very measured and almost methodical in some ways with your personal action. But it is personal action towards fairness, justice, equity, right? I mean, it's about the social contract. So that's Mars and Libra. So that's going to be the case for a little while with Mars and Libra. Now, Mars is opposite Saturn. It's in a trine to Uranus, and it's going to be in a trine to Pluto. So this grand air trine with Uranus the trigger, Pluto the destroyer, and then Mars the warrior. So there's a lot of intensity in this in just that grand air trine, and not in a bad way. It's very stabilized in terms of our mind and information, ideas, how they're communicated, how things are balanced. And certainly when we're talking about Aquarius, we're talking about the network as a whole, right? Now, the opposition to Saturn, especially with Mars, is going to be quite interesting because Saturn is truly father time. And in the sign of Aries, especially as it's been retrograde, it has just been like, because Aries is timeless, right? And Saturn's trying to, Saturn has the energy of wanting to implement a structure of time around something timeless. And that has also, I've been feeling that as well, right? There has been a lot of attempting to structure things that are unstructurable, if that makes sense, especially internally. That's, as time is becoming less and less of a thing as we are ascending in densities, Saturn's role in terms of like, I'm trying to structure this timelessness it's not really working, especially internally as well. Mars in its opposition, and this is not going to be until the full moon itself. We're going to talk about its trine to Uranus first, but it's like a mutual reception. They're both in signs that they would prefer, that the other would prefer to be in, right? Saturn would prefer to be in Libra because there is a definitive structure to the scales of justice, right? There is a finite amount of matter involved, and it can only be measured one way in order to achieve 0 point. And so Saturn wants to be there, Mars wants to be there. So that's something to keep in mind as well, that the opposition may not be necessarily as brutal as it could be because they are kind of in an understanding with each other. They can learn from each other, right? In terms of this opposition. They can see each other's perspectives from the other side. And they're like, maybe we can find a way to balance this as opposed to tear each other apart, right? And I think the main themes here, especially at 2 degrees Libra, which is where Mars is right now, which is a threshold, right? The Libra archetype is about that perfect archetypal sacred life, right? Where it's perfectly balanced. But that is not a static experience. That is something that is just in a moment. And then you come back to the center. And part of that is recognizing where we've been and where we're going and crossing that threshold. And so Saturn, though, has been in this position, a very difficult position, I might add, where we have all had to turn the mirror of objectivity onto ourselves, and certainly knowing where Aries has been and is in your chart or your charts, plural, certainly gives an indication of what area of life this is really wreaking havoc on. But it has been very heavy, and it has been trying to structure something that's unstructurable. But we still are being tasked with looking at ourselves in the mirror and having to be objective about it, and keeping a sense of humor. Saturn has absolutely no sense of humor, none whatsoever. And when it's retrograde, it's even worse, right? It can be a really difficult position. And of course, Saturn is weak in Aries as well. And so it's been overcompensating, trying to give a structure, trying to put a time frame around something that is outside of time. So this opposition is giving a place for all this energy to really actually go, which is the spine of this kite. So before we get there, though, I want to talk about Mars and Uranus. Uranus is at 2 degrees. And then we're going to get into the full moon itself. And then, like I said, it's a banger of a week, right? We got incredible transits coming. Mercury is going to station direct this week. Venus and Jupiter are conjunct in the constellation of Gemini, but they're going to be conjunct in alignment with Sirius. That is huge. And the third quarter moon, which is going to be, when we finally pass out of these Lionsgate energies, is a very Pleiadian energy. So we'll get to that. Now, Mars trine Uranus. Now, Uranus is at 2 degrees Gemini, right? This is Santa Claus filling those stockings. And the idea here is that we are, as much as the Gemini energy is about communicating and observing, right? It's also about listening and being open to receive. And this is what 2 degrees represents in Gemini. So we have, the stockings need to be hung, and there has to be this kind of innocent openness to them being filled, right? And so there's spiritual blessings that are related to 2 degrees Gemini, okay? And this is also the degree that Uranus is going to station retrograde, which is the day before the total lunar eclipse, the full moon total lunar eclipse, which is the 7th of September. So the 6th of September is when Uranus is going to station retrograde at the same degree. So just, you can just bank on the fact that it always is an about face and in a direction we didn't anticipate, and something usually happens that we can't anticipate. Maybe we're open to the blessings of what's coming in the stocking, but maybe we're not quite ready for what actually is going to be in there. So that's just something to keep in mind as the eclipse cycle comes to a close. But we got a couple weeks till that happens. In the meantime, Mars and Uranus are in this trine. And what does this really represent? So it's kind of a fun transit, right? It allows you to take some risks, and you feel a strong urge to break free of restrictions. Oh, that's pretty interesting considering we're at this Lionsgate today as this transit is happening, right? So it's Mars in Libra is kind of showing us where we've been so that we have the initiative to move forward to where we want to go. And this trine to Uranus is opportunity for new activities, new relationships, new feelings. I'm getting a big swell on this one. Your instincts are going to be strong and accurate, right? It's very stabilizing, and especially mental energy. So taking risks, calculated, maybe not even fully calculated, but opportunities present themselves, and you don't want to think about it, you just want to act, which is a great Mars energy. Your need for freedom, new self-expression, doesn't, in this type of transit, doesn't necessarily mean that things are going to have a significant upheaval. And this is going to be even more stabilized, I think, by Saturn later when it's in the sextile to Uranus, right? Not necessarily stabilized, but we can make the most of this energy in a way that brings order out of chaos. But right now, even Mars trine Uranus, there doesn't need to be significant upheaval for you to take these new risks, right? It's a great time for starting new projects. It's daring energy. And yes, eventually the fighting spirit will fade. And I think that it's going to be challenged immediately by Saturn and Neptune, but that's okay. So this is a great time to start something, to make a, to just jump on something that maybe is presenting itself, right? And that's what's happening with this Mars trine Uranus, specifically that we're open to receiving these, gifts essentially, and having the sight, or not even the sight, because Libra, again, Lady Justice is blind, but having the sense of where we've been and where we're going. It's like the fruits of the past experiences will show us the seed of the next cycle, but it's just the seed, right? It hasn't started germinating and growing yet because it's not time. It's just showing us what the potential is. And I think this is really great. Now, of course, Mars is going to be opposite Saturn also today, which brings frustration, disappointment, anger. Frustration is a big theme right now. It has been something I know I'm personally feeling on a lot of different levels. Other people have reported, and of course, frustration is everywhere with all kinds of stuff, but this really brings it out. Mars opposite Saturn, okay? And which is, again, the spine of the kite. So Mars opposite Saturn, just generally take away the signs that they're in, take away the retrograde. It can be very disappointing. It can bring frustration, especially people standing in your way and being disappointed when things are unfulfilled. There's a lot of that as well. And like I said, people are holding, they don't even realize how much is weighing them down, but it is weighing them down to the point where they are really struggling to get through this gateway. So there's like outrage, and I've seen that too. My gosh, it's kind of everywhere. And it might be challenging to express in a mature, clear way. So self-discipline and patience, which is why I personally enacted some protocols that forced me into some discipline, right, in order to practice this patience. So even if you don't have any adversaries necessarily, you can be your own worst enemy. And with this Saturn retrograde, oh boy, I'm feeling this right now, especially. We can be our own worst enemy. Absolutely right now, because it's difficult to look at yourself in the mirror and have an objective and humorous approach to what you're seeing, especially when you have to have all of the negative stuff reflected back at you. You may feel weak, you may feel unattractive, you may feel impotent in all kinds of ways. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And this Mars trine Uranus aspect is really helpful right now to give us something to look forward to and the things to capitalize on. So don't beat yourself up, right? Because there is a tendency with this type of transit to really get into self-medicating because you're feeling so frustrated and unfulfilled, right? Now, personal attacks can happen and they can be excruciating. And I'll tell you what, I have seen the mean streaks, and it is very satisfying to, throw that back at people. So again, I would say maybe be more patient when people are not and they're just letting this shit come out. Others may be maliciously trying to damage your reputation or career. There may be karmic undertones that are envious or jealous. That's definitely a possibility here, because some people aren't able to see the fruits of their past experiences, or they do not like what, maybe their fruit is rotten and they don't have a seed that's coming out of it. And in order to deal with that, they are taking it out on other people. So just be aware of that. Again, patience, self-discipline. It's very destructive energy. And if you don't find a healthy way to let it out, again, the Mars trine Uranus is a great way. And avoiding the conflict is probably better right now in order to steer this energy into something that's productive. Again, self-discipline, patience, steely determination can lead to satisfying results, right? And again, sharpen your knives. Don't use them. I think that's a great piece of advice that I picked up for this particular transit. So now we're into, I want to move into the full moon itself, because this is the time where our purpose is clarified. Now, Leo is about the individual heart expressing itself, but Aquarius, like I said many times, is the network of, oh gosh, look at this. I didn't even notice this till now. The fact that Lilith and Chiron are in opposition to each other, and Lilith is in a conjunction to Arcturus. Whoo, boy. Talk about needing to tap into that power of being very measured and very deep and philosophical and not getting caught up in your own wounding, but also realizing that there's lots to be learned from your wounding, which is Chiron in retrograde. Ooh, golly. My, oh my. This is intense, as we've probably already anticipated. So, full moon in Aquarius. Now, this degree of the moon is a watchdog stands guard, protecting his master and his possessions, right? And so we might feel emotionally like we need to stand guard. Perhaps we are feeling that we need to stand guard for our emotional body, right? Our internal emotional landscape. This degree of Aquarius, 17 degrees Aquarius, right? And let me see where we are here. This is just past the full moon. Maybe I should go back a couple hours so you can see the transit in action, so you can see it. Oh, yeah, I want to actually, because you're going to see all three of these. There we go. All three of these oppositions happening at the same time on the 9th. Whoo, boy. That's a lot of oppositions at once, right? There's a lot of being pulled in many different directions at this full moon. So anyway, the full moon, the watchdog standing guard. Now, the sun is at a degree that is, a volunteer church choir singing hymns together, right? A feeling of togetherness, right? It unites us in a collective ideal. These individuals coming together. There's a form of communion with all these individual hearts coming together. And it's a quickening in some ways of our hearts through like this collective interest. Now, the moon is highlighting the fact that there's a need to emotionally develop the capacity to protect ourselves. It's one thing to come together, right? And anybody who works in any type of environment with the public, with coworkers, you're in a family, you're in any situation, you're all individuals coming together with a common goal, but that doesn't mean that you lose yourself. And that's what this degree really highlights, for me at least, the development of the capacity to protect oneself and to safeguard one's individual rights. And maybe it is in the coming together and having a collective voice that really highlights this need to safeguard our individual rights under complex social pressures. And I would say that the social pressures are very complex right now. Absolutely. So knowing where Aquarius is in your chart is very helpful. Community integrity, it requires that each separate participant is strengthened in whatever it is that we're contributing, right? So we each can pick up the slack and stand ready to protect and reinforce each other as necessary, especially in a moment of crisis. So there is kind of this unswerving faithfulness to an ideal. But besides that, there's a determination to achieve that as well. That's it's going to clarify this type of purpose. So again, where's Aquarius in your chart? What area of life is this being highlighted in, right? Now, at the same time, we go back to Mars, which is now going to be exactly opposite Neptune at the time of this full moon. So Mars is still at 2 degrees Libra, right? That threshold, the mirror which history provides so that each new generation may see itself reflected in its own past and challenged to a real future, And with Mars, we do feel that sense of action, want to take action for this. And the opposition to Neptune is very discouraging. Again, because maybe we're struggling with the reality of what that past has been, right? We're looking at the mirror of ourselves and we're like, whoa, this is really hard to deal with. This can be a really low point in the energy as well. So just keep that in mind, that is something that's going to be part of this full moon energy, along with of course, the opposition to Saturn. It's not a good influence for being super competitive. Now, Mars in Libra, again, it's very measured. So it doesn't necessarily have to be competitive, but our action can be towards justice and fairness and a sense of balance. So, and you may face strong opposition, and your chances of winning are not good with Mars opposite Neptune. It's not to say that you shouldn't do anything. There's just a lot of energy that could easily weaken your vitality and be very discouraging. And there can be a lot of stress associated with performance, right? And you don't want to be embarrassed. You don't want to suffer disappointment. But that doesn't mean that there's nothing to learn from this situation. It just keeps going back to disappointment and loss are likely if you become too assertive or try to achieve things. And like I said, with Mars and Libra, there's a tendency to overcompensate and force this issue. And Neptune in his opposition, especially its retrograde, is going to, like the smoke and mirrors, right? The veil is gone and we are seeing things for what they are. And it's very significant period of falling victim to things that trigger your adrenaline. So just keep that in mind right now, that again, remember, sharpen your knives, don't use them, or conserve your energy through something spiritual or creative. And just being aware and open to the blessings that you want to come into your life. And this is really best done by yourself and quietly. I do feel like a lot of this is an individual journey right now. And to just be aware of that, especially with all these retrogrades. And you may get a rush out of things, but, I wouldn't put too much stock in it. Necessarily. Maybe just ride the rush, but don't feed into it too much, okay? Now, when we move past this is when Mars is going to come into a trine with Pluto, and that's already building too, as you can see. So Mars is going to move into the next degree of Libra, 3 degrees Libra. The dawn of a new day reveals everything changed, right? Because when you drop all those burdens that you didn't even realize you were holding, and move through this gateway, it is changed. Everything is changed. And then it comes into a trine with Pluto, which is gives you a lot of goal-directed energy, making you very ambitious. So I just spent all this time talking about how the oppositions to Saturn and Neptune are going to weaken you and weaken all of us, and we're going to feel frustrated and disappointed. And then right away, Mars trine Pluto retrograde and giving us a surge of goal-directed energy. So it's really just about making it through the next 2 days. And then you get this surge of energy where you can be assertive and direct in achieving your desires, right? So it does feel like this is a moment right now where we just kind of maybe we turn around and look at where we've been versus where we're going, right? We're not trying to get anywhere necessarily, but leave ourselves open to the blessings and the opportunities that will then take us. And then bam, the 10th comes and we get this surge of energy. We increased passion to explore the mysteries of life, investigation into all kinds of things, right? Leadership potential is very highlighted with a Mars trine Pluto, and being very confident as we navigate through challenging situations. So what I would say here is, hold tight for the next 2 days as we're moving through this gateway and being very reflective on where we've been and learning as much as we can about where we've been and the challenges we've faced. And then when we come out the other side and we start moving away from the gateway throughout the next week, this Mars trine Pluto really gives us that surge of energy, and we have courage to stand up and be counted, eliminate obstacles hindering success, right? And also working on our inner stuff, right? Making those transformations is pretty substantial. And then from there, like I said, it's a banger of a week, even just the weekend, my gosh. But then we come to Monday and Mercury stations direct in Leo. And then right after that, or as that's happening, this is the Mercury Uranus sextile. This is no joke, right? I think things are really going to blast off come Monday, right? So Saturn sextile Uranus, it gives self-discipline, endurance, open-mindedness, and inventiveness. That's the Uranus aspect. It enables us to make constructive changes, right? So again, taking the time right now to be reflective and thoughtful and to be aware of what's being offered to us so that we come into, and to really just, get as much potential energy out of those oppositions so that when we come to Monday, Mercury stations direct, Saturn sextile to Uranus, right? Common sense blended with creative flair allows us to take calculated risks that increase the likelihood of success. Now, this is a sextile from Saturn to Uranus, right? So there's order out of chaos, right? And you can make other people feel safe and secure during times of upheaval with something like this. I would say with the retrograde of Saturn, we're probably going to allow ourselves to feel safe and secure in a time of upheaval, right? And I mean, that may translate out as well. Old systems or traditions that have caused restriction can be updated and modified without disrespecting where you've come from. That's very interesting. Practical applications to discoveries, a good time to master a particularly challenging or intricate technique or skill. Now, this is something that's been building. It's not like this hasn't been building and then you come to this sextile and it's just like, bam, it's just right away. But when it is exact, that Uranus aspect is going to be the part that kind of triggers something to change. Previous uncertainty or restlessness should settle down during this time, especially once we come to this point and Mercury stations direct. I feel like after this is when things are going to settle. You can commit to something or someone that you were unsure about or hesitant about, and this is a great time to renovate or move or make changes, okay? Unexpected repercussions are less likely with a transit like this because of the Saturn nature. And working really well as part of a team, right? Uniting for a common purpose. It's kind of interesting with all this full moon energy. Right after that on the 12th is when Venus and Jupiter come into conjunction. Boy, I mean, this is one of the best. And it's going to be conjunct at 15 Cancer, which is a Syrian starseed activation. Wow. 15 degrees Cancer is in a big dining hall. Everybody's relaxing after they've had a huge banquet. It's like being totally satisfied. And it represents, it's a symbol of the richness of life in any situation, right? And so Venus, Jupiter coming together. Number one, Jupiter is in its exaltation in Cancer. Okay, so already extra expansive, good luck, blessings, fortune with Jupiter here. And then Venus in Cancer, right? Which is very maternal, very nurturing, very deep, and a lot of value on the family, right? So these two coming together in the sign of Cancer portends love, money, harmony, happiness. This is such a great transit. It's time to enjoy the benefits of good karma from previous good deeds, right? Now, that doesn't come without its challenges, and that's everything we've been going through, is going through the shit, basically, and coming out the other side unburdened because we trusted that we didn't need those things, and we may not know exactly how it's going to go, but we pass through the gateway anyway. You don't have to work so hard or struggle with Venus conjunct Jupiter, right? Beautiful things are attracted to us, right? Inner harmony, warmth, and friendliness. Ideally, you want to engage with as many people as possible. I mean, Venus is about relationship, the value of relationship to us, but Jupiter is about the social purpose and social wealth, right? It is about the larger social dynamic. So, expose yourself to the most significant opportunities by being around people, engaging with people, being social. And maybe that's just with the family. Maybe that's just with your tribe, so to speak, or your clan, so to speak. Those groups that you feel, what's the word I'm looking for? The spiritual family. I'm having a hard time grasping it right now, but You know what I mean? So whatever it is, relationships of all kinds are significant during a conjunction. Again, family, home, those intimate places of the Cancer energy are really getting a beautiful expansion here with this. This is really great. And it's one of the best transits for falling in love or, starting a family, something like that, Venus conjunct Jupiter in Cancer, and something that materializes, right? To materialize the concept of fulfillment. And, wealth and abundance are very big parts of Venus and Jupiter. So this is incredible. So Monday, Tuesday, where are we at? Is this Wednesday? No, this is still Tuesday. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Just bam, bam, bam. Just like such good transits. And as we come up to the 16th, Mercury is going to sextile Mars as it's coming out of its retrograde. And this just kind of speeds everything up in your mind, driven to succeed at accomplishing something with purpose and initiative, right? And it really allows, especially communication, that, in the sign of Leo is very confident, expressive, can be very dramatic in terms of what we're expressing. But this 5 degrees Leo is something that represents an endurance, something that lasts, okay? Something that is more than just the fluctuations of all of the dynamics at play, right? Something that is large scale. Actually, 5 degrees Leo is like a canyon, right? A really deep canyon with all these towering structures, right? It's just like, look at what evolution and like time has done. There's so many cycles that create and shape the landscape, right? And that there's something to be revealed there, right? So, but this transit's the first, there's going to be another one. You can be direct and honest with Mercury sextile Mars, right? Especially Mars in Libra, right? That again, it's very measured, it's very balanced here, and it's a really good time again to complete tasks you have previously put off in the too hard basket. This is nice, and this is much more related to the personal experience. Like, okay, I've been putting this off. Let's try to get this done. And socializing is really good for something like this. Mercury Mars sextile, right? And taking bold action that you would otherwise be too shy or cautious about. This is really great. So just consider that there may be opportunities, something materializes with Venus and Jupiter conjunct, and then you have this sextile with Mars and Mercury that's going to be like, okay, maybe I can act on it. That's not a terrible idea because the second one is going to happen right after on the 18th. So it really calms down once we hit the third quarter moon, right? There are definitely some transits that we're going to go over the membership when we get to this point. But the thing that I'd like to point out here is that this third quarter moon in Taurus is very Pleiadian, including the moon in Taurus. Now, the moon is exalted in Taurus. It likes being in Taurus, but a quarter moon, especially a third quarter moon, is a crisis in consciousness, right? This is where we have to just start distilling things down to their essence as we are finishing out this lunar cycle. The moon's light is waning at this point. It's getting darker. We have to take the initiative to keep implementing that which was revealed to us with the full moon, which was what? The watchdog standing guard, the need to protect ourselves and each other from complex social pressures. Now, this degree, this is going to be, I'm just going to give you the imagery because I think it'll make more sense here. And also just to do a little bit review here for a second on Pleiadian starseed energy, because these are the empaths of the starseed community, and they tend to have the worst boundaries. Let's be real here, okay? Because the Pleiadian nature wants to be connected to everything, right? And this is where your healers come from, right? This is where people who are very empathic come from. They tend to be Pleiadian starseeds. But the other side of this is they have terrible and very loose emotional boundaries. So you get all kinds of attachments, you get all kinds of drainage because the Pleiadian nature is to be in full, seamless communion with everything around you, so that there's really no need to protect yourself because you're in communion with nature and Gaia and everything else. Well, there is a need at this point to have an authority or a command over one's physical nature here. And in this case, our emotions. And it may kind of come out in a very aggressive way in kind of like this emotional warrior sense, which seems kind of counterintuitive to a moon in Taurus. That's kind of like emotionally like, oh, I'm just going to sit back and chill. But this degree is very much about the mounted warrior that is riding fiercely, taking scalps, okay? We may feel there's going to be that tension and friction there between that and the sadhu that is in total communion with spirit, in total concentration, that is letting everything else go to the, fall by the wayside because we're in total, samadhi, basically, right? Total communion with spirit, and being just like those sadhus that like have all these nappy dreadlocks, and their fingernails have like, they're completely unkempt, right? But that's because everything else has fallen away and they're just totally concentrated. It is the degree of 88. If you have 23 to 24 degrees Leo prominent in your chart, that is the degree of ADHD people. I could say for sure because I have seen it time and time again. And that's not a negative thing. It just is what it is. But the moon in Taurus here, I just feel like it's gonna come to a point here, this friction of being that sadhu, which is, very gratifying at a spiritual level to be in full communion at a heart level with spirit. But that moon in Taurus is going to be like, yeah, but we got to be in total command here of our emotions and our senses. And actually command them, have some measure of authority. How that's going to transpire, I'm not entirely sure. But what I'm, based on the full moon here and the fact that we're really being challenged to institute some measure of protection for ourselves emotionally, there's that aspect of the Pleiadian nature that never gets talked about, which is the warrior. It's the masculine side, right? The Pleiadian nature is heart-centered, which means that it's both feminine and masculine. But, the branding of the Pleiadian nature, which I've always said for years now, has been intentionally only on the feminine side and really takes away from the warrior. And I think that's on purpose, right? It keeps people, empaths, like completely open to be siphoned off of and to have terrible boundaries. So it's going to reinstitute itself at this third quarter moon, and more of a reminder. And it's not to say that we can't focus and be in that state of pure bliss that the unkempt sadhu is actually in at that moment, but there is a need emotionally to take that watchdog energy and actually become a fierce warrior in order to protect those boundaries, right? And I say that as having my own Pleiadian starseed nature, being in the healing arts for decades, and knowing what this means on a daily basis. And so it's going to come up again, but this week leading up to it is just, like I said, there's just opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. Right now, we've walked through the gateway. We can be reflective. We can see where we've been in order to know where we're going, where we don't want to go. We want to leave behind where we've been and not take all that baggage with us, but that doesn't mean the work is over. And I will say that it has been pretty obvious to me, and continues to be, that those who that don't create and have only gained power by disempowering and siphoning and feeding, the parasites, basically, as they are grappling for anything, they're going to continue to take whatever they can. And I think that it's time to stand up, right? This is what this is all about, that we are authentic in our hearts. We come together, we create a resonance, each of us, that creates this, this, I don't want to say a barrier, but it is, right? It's a barrier of that which is so vulnerable, which is represented by the moon, right? Our emotional landscape, our feels, right? It's truly something we need to protect. So, and then from there, it really just mellows out till the end of the lunar cycle. So I'm going to leave it there for this full moon forecast. I hope that everybody has been unburdened by what has been as much as you can. And if you're interested in Catalyst membership, you will be doing an energy reading next week at this third quarter moon. So if you're looking for some extra guidance, inspiration, some clarity, you may want to sign up. $3, $6, or $9. $9 premium membership gets you your own reading every month, as well as all of this and supporting this work, right? Because internet ain't free right now, and neither is electricity or website subscriptions or all the other stuff that it takes to manage this practice. So, my friends, thank you for being here. I truly appreciate all of you so very much. And of course, if you are interested in a personal reading, getting your natal chart done, looking at your star seed markings, anything like that, you're free to go to my website. You're welcome to see what I have to offer. And you can book something with me and we'll get it scheduled. So just know that the eclipse reading is only going to be available to the membership. So if that entices you, you may want to sign up. And yeah, that'll do it. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate all of you so very much. To the Catalyst membership, I'll see you all next week for our collective energy reading. And until then, take very good care. Have a great week. It seems like it's going to be pretty amazing. See you later. Bye.